All right, fellow team players, this is Bob here. Joe's on the other end, and we're here to talk about the Fantasy Value Hour with you. We know you have a lot of opportunities to get your content from other places, so we thank you very much for joining us here today. And let's get it going, and we can hear lots of thoughts from around the league.
Welcome to Local Football Flavor, where we talk to local fans to get the real information of what's going on with their team. Yeah, Bob. So welcome to the party here. Oh, shit. I got shit going on everywhere, Bob.
You got everything going on.
Everything.
Yeah, Joe, like this week, we had some incredible performances. We had a lot of stuff going on throughout the league, especially in the running back department, especially in the quarterback department. And there's just a lot of influx situations right now across the league. We saw one team get rid of a superstar, win a game, and look really good. We saw another team gain that superstar and really not do very well. We saw teams that have been really slow on the come up over the first couple of weeks. We saw their offenses churning, and it's been through the legs of workhorse running backs, pass catching running backs. And that's kind of been what the sense of the league is this year, for me at least, is that these pass catching running backs that we're seeing right now, if you can, I don't know, man, if you can catch like 5-6 passes a game, 7 passes a game, get like 50 yards and get like 60 yards on the ground, you're putting your team into a good spot to win the game. And a lot of players, not a lot of players can do that, but the players that can do that did come out this week, did come out of the woodwork a little bit this week. Speaking particularly about Austin Eckler and Aaron Jones. We also saw, when you really know who your talent is and you go through the talent in Oakland, with Brandon Jacobs putting up 3 touchdowns, with Davanta Adams not getting a touchdown but still getting a decent amount of yards. And so around the league, there's a lot of situations that we thought a couple weeks ago would be better, and they're not. And some of them that are, and some of them that we thought were really good that are now backsliding again because of the things that we've been thinking about. So, I'd like to start with Christian McCaffrey here. If we could, because
we'll start with that game because that Kansas. I got some thoughts on Kansas City.
A lot of I watched. So I didn't watch that game. I watched the game cast of it.
Okay.
Because I had a lot of things to do. I watched the early game and the late game, but I didn't watch any of the games in the 4 o'clock.
I mean, it was great for a half,
window.
And then it was a little gross.
What I saw in the stats to start the game, and maybe you can speak of this because you watched the game, is I saw 3 carries, 30 yards. Then he ended up with like 50 yards, 42 yards or something like that.
He didn't play the second half. Basically,
what happened?
They pulled everyone. So Kansas City was kicking their ass.
Was it that much of a bloodbath?
Oh yeah, they won by like 20.
I know they won.
So it was tight at halftime,
but
Hardman had big plays. Hardman was not a consistent factor of that game. One of the disappointments to me was on how they said in that blurb you actually sent me in the morning that Pacheco was going to be the starting back, and he didn't lead the team in carries. It looked like they're like, we don't want Pacheco to be our back.
Well, it was kind of like the Gus Edwards, Kenyan Drake situation where like Gus Edwards was hurt, come back. They were like, okay, we're going to put Gus in the first few plays. And then they put Kenyan Drake in. And then all of a sudden they were like, okay, we're going back to Gus Edwards.
Yeah, we're never picking Kenyan Drake in a DFS again.
That was such.
We were so stupid. We took him and Peoples-Jones on inside the DFS crowd. That was stupid. We should not.
Peoples-Jones did okay.
He
didn't do okay for the beginning of the game, but he ended up pulling out a couple of plays at the end of the game. The play there, I said, we could play Mecole Hardman. That was the play. Mecole Hardman at that price.
He still only got 4 touches, basically. He just made the most of them, which, when you got that kind of speed, you can. And when we think about when we have that conversation with the Saints, they'll be coming out here on Friday about, the hell's his name? Shaheed, my bad. It's the same deal. Speed guys can just do weird things. And Kansas City is not missing Tyreek Hill. I think that can be safely said. Kansas City, Hartman takes part of that responsibility. But remember last year around this time, people started playing cover 3 against Kansas City, and Mahomes was just forcing the ball in interceptions. And then he realized, okay, I'll just be patient with you guys, and then I'll just bleed you to death with Kelsey, which is what he did. Yeah. And then teams are like, they don't have Tyreek Hill. We don't need to play cover 3. We'll just hit Kelsey constantly. And for the most part, that worked because Valdez-Scantling drops the ball like crazy. He by default has started relying on JuJu now because JuJu actually holds on to the ball. I'm not thrilled with that, period. But JuJu is a good man coverage beater. He is that. Not good against zone, but he's good against man. So all that being said, they're going to end up being the nickel and dime offense and Hartman over the top when they need him, but they don't need him. I mean, that part's clearly obvious. Yeah, when they actually want to run it, they can run it very well. Right. They just choose to stop running it very easily.
But going back to San Francisco here is that when we looked, when we said, Christian McCaffrey's coming in, what was your impression of how he looked in that game? Just being straight, out of the fire and into the furnace. What's your feeling? Do you think that once they get rolling, that this is going to be a good fit?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. So my initial thoughts basically were, this is a guy who's immensely talented, and because of that, he can adjust. But it is something that when you're running behind a line, you just got to get used to him. I mean, that's just the way that it is. He should not have put up 5 yards of carry in his first game. No one should do that in a transfer. Looking at Robinson this week, you don't expect that whenever you're looking over there. So all this to say, McCaffrey was able to make it work. I don't think James Robinson with the Jets is going to be able to make it work.
But that's a completely different running back, though.
He is, but the concept remains the same. You need to know how your line is going to block for them, and you just got to be able to do it. I mean, it is. So do I think that McCaffrey is going to go insane? Yes. I'm not worried about that. The defense of Kansas City got shredded in the second half. There's no way around that. They just imploded. And then it was almost Kansas City treated almost the way that Philadelphia has been playing people this year. They don't come off the field if they don't want to. They just stayed out there. And eventually Mahomes was like, all right, I'm ready for a drink. Touchdown.
Oh, you mean San Francisco?
No, that's what Kansas City did to San Francisco's defense.
No, you were saying Kansas City's defense.
Oh, no, sorry. San Francisco's defense could not get off the field in the second half. And they were essentially just doing whatever Kansas City wanted to do in that second half they could. So Kansas City did, like I said, as the Eagles did. They controlled the entire pace of the game. Once the Niners had to do 2 straight drives of a punt, it was over in the second half. They got down by 18 and they weren't coming back. They ended up pulling Jimmy and their entire offense. It got really ugly there. So and to do that at home says something. But that's kind of the Shanahan way, looking at the futures. He punted on the game and let it be. So at the end of the day, what I think I learned more than anything out of that game is that San Francisco is not going to step up and be an elite force in the NFC. They're going to remain in the general blah that is the NFC with the Eagles and then everyone else. The NFC South is a disaster. I am 100% confident in saying that. And when we look at this in its totality, I mean, it's going to be weird to say the East might put 3 teams in. And
I said it before.
I know you did, but I never believed it to be true. And it's, I know when one of our first ones, we were having this fight about how Green Bay is going to run away the division. And that's what I went with them. And
I didn't say that. I
said that. You said Minnesota. And I'm amazed that Green Bay is not doing anything. But right now, I mean, well, I don't even think they'd win the South if they were in that.
Here's the issue with Green Bay, and we've touched on it many times, is that, okay, last week Aaron Jones finally had a game where he had 10 receptions, 2 touchdowns, and like 20 yards rushing because they finally were like, we're going to use him and he's going to be the guy this game. Obviously, he was on my bench this week because I started Breece Hall. And again, this is the 8-man league. So I started Breece Hall, Zeke, Derrick Henry, and Kamara. And so I lost by a lot because the other Steve, who I was playing, scored 237 points with his lineup, and I wouldn't even have won with Aaron Jones in the lineup. But
team's loaded.
It speaks to a larger issue with Green Bay, is that they're so, like, Aaron Rodgers, okay, he put up 2 touchdowns, and I said if by X week he hasn't put up this amount of touchdowns, it's not worth it anymore, and he hasn't.
He hasn't.
That game against the Commanders, he shouldn't have even had the second touchdown. Aaron Jones made that play happen, and Washington's defense let it happen. And
that's a bad defense.
The issue is that Aaron Rodgers the team is not good. It's not a good offense. The Packers defense did something, and we talked about that, and I don't want to belabor the point, but we talked about this ad nauseum a couple weeks ago, is that what you see one half, you're not going to get the next half. And what you see on offense one half or on defense, whether, because I texted you at the beginning of the Packers game, I said, oh, look at the DeAndre Campbell touchdown. This is looking good for our DFS lineup. And they fell apart in the second half. And then Aaron Jones was like, okay, they can't get it together. And one of the things that's infuriating about this team is that, okay, I moved on from Aaron Rodgers. I traded him away.
Which I'm so upset at you about.
And I traded him and Judy away for Pitts and Etienne, because I think Etienne's going to be a beast coming back or going into the rest of the season. And
I agree with that. Pitts is an all or nothing shot. But
yeah, well, I have Goddard too. So, but Goddard, he was just more of a bye week guy. But talent-wise, he has the chance to be.
Talent-wise, he should be the number 1 tight end.
So back to the Packers is that AJ Dillon was non-existent, and none of the Packers, like, we were like, oh, Romeo Doubs has a chance to really break off. He did nothing. They didn't even throw the ball to him. I don't think he was like zeros throughout the board, and they have no idea what in the world they want to do as a team and keep it consistent. And I've been saying it for weeks upon weeks upon weeks.
That's true. Their offensive line is not very good either.
Teams that even if you are consistently bad, you can plan. But like the Packers are a team that you're like, oh man, they're really good this half. They don't play a complete game on either side of the ball. And if you own any of the fantasy players from either side of the ball on this team, like we said, you want to own the skill position players rather than Aaron Rodgers. You probably want to own the linebackers on Green Bay if you're in an IDP league. But the issue is that I'm not confident on a week-to-week basis that Aaron Jones is going to get 10 catches. Because if he didn't get 10 catches, he would have had 2 points.
He got in the end zone.
No, I'm saying if he wouldn't have had those 10 catches.
Oh, you mean the catches that got him his touchdowns as well?
Yeah.
Because he got in the end zone.
But he only had 20 yards rushing. So, like, when I look at it, he had 28 total points in our league. He had 10 catches, which is 10 of those points. And I think he had 2 touchdowns, which is 12 of those points. You take it back down to earth and you say 6 catches, you're looking at a point differential there that is extremely volatile. And it's not trustworthy. And like we said, usually when Aaron Jones has a decent game or a good game, the next week he doesn't even show up. And
yeah, this makes me sad because there's someone out there who was sitting here in a 10 or 12 man league at the end of the first round who could have gone receiver, and then potentially stacked picks 3, 4, and 5 being Zeke, Sanders, and Jacobs.
Sanders?
from Miles Sanders from Philly.
Oh, Miles Sanders. Okay.
You could have those three as your running backs, 2 stud receivers.
You could
have Diggs
you could have
Diggs and Davanta Adams, and those three. That draft happened to some people at the end of the first round,
and
where they
winning.
went. They're not winning; they're destroying their leagues.
Well, no, I mean, I had so there's a guy who took Kamara and Barkley at the end of our first round, but usually,
I'm saying taking those 3 running backs in 3, 4, and 5, which all were there.
In some leagues,
Yeah,
Zeke was drafted in the second round in my Yahoo league, so in some leagues. But to your point, though, is in my Yahoo league, I took Derrick Henry when I drafted. I think I drafted 4th overall. Came back around, got Davanta Adams. Came back around, and then on that little turn there, got ETN. Went back around, got David Montgomery, and then picked Chase Edmonds. Now, Chase Edmonds was a disaster of a pick. I wish I wouldn't have picked him.
Yeah, Mostert has taken over that job.
Because
there's no doubt about that.
It's really hampered my wide receivers a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But knowing what's happening now, I still wouldn't have changed what I walked into the draft wanting to do, because Aaron Jones, and this is the thing about the fact that some people drafted AJ Dillon pretty high, thinking that he was going to get a lot of carries and stuff. That dichotomy on the Packers is similar to the volatility of Ravens wide receivers. Mm-hmm. And it's similar to the volatility that we see in teams that aren't confident in a particular skill position or in particular group or in a particular player. Like when I look at the Ravens and I see, 1 week Devin Duvernay doing something, 1 week Rashad Bateman doing something, 1 week Lamar Jackson goes off. And we did say Lamar Jackson was going to have a fall off. He did get hurt and he has had his fall off. So if you sold high on him, I said sell him for Carson Wentz and Derrick Henry. Hopefully you didn't sell him for Carson Wentz.
So you got Henry out of it, it's worth it.
But you got Henry out of it, so it is worth it for a while. But what to the point I'm trying to make is when you have so much volatility, especially in fantasy numbers usually equal some sort of volatility in the actual game or in the actual position player or the way the game script is going.
Mm-hmm.
You can't confidently put those guys in your lineup. So then you're at a point now where you're saying to yourself, okay, I'm at the point where I'm deciding if I'm going to start ETN or Aaron Jones. And you ask yourself, why not both? And then you say, I don't know. And guys like Aaron Jones are at this point in the season, I'm just only taking the first 7 weeks here, are the worst type of people to own. Because they offer you that false hope, particularly when you go into the week and you say, I'm getting to win by 45 or 25. And Aaron Jones is supposed to get 16 points. And then he comes out, lays a goose egg, gets you 5. Mm-hmm. Then the next week he comes out and gets you 28. As I said a couple weeks ago, you can have your number
2 running back be like that, but your lead dog can't be.
Your lead dog can't do that. And that's why, a high floor is nice, but I do like some volatility. I do like the potential to smack for 28. I do like the potential to smack for 30.
Yeah, see, now you're describing Chase Young, where it's not going.
I need the floor to be a little bit higher.
No, I get it. And this is the problem everyone, the key running backs across football we went through last week, Najee being the other main one, is going there. It's being, very frustrating. When it's all said and done, I'm not a fan of it. As someone who took Najee than Aaron Jones, it has not been a fun ride.
Yeah, it's definitely not been. But I'll tell you this though, with the 0 running back strategy this year, if you pick the right wide receivers and you pick the right running backs, and Breece Hall was one of them up until this week.
Jacobs was one of them. Sanders was one of them.
Pierce. But a lot of people were shying away from Jacobs in the draft, and this was definitely something that was true about my Yahoo league, and definitely something that was true about our Dynasty league here, or our Keeper league, is that Jacobs was another one of those players at the end of the year that, okay, 15 points, 11 points. But there would be a game where he'd put up 28 and then he'd be back down again to like 10 or 9. And when you have a lot of options, like in an 8-team league, the odds of you, unless you drafted him to be your starter, the odds of you putting Jacobs into your lineup
is
hard because you're going against some other things. But Aaron Jones is even harder than Brandon Jacobs because he carries with him such a history of the potential to do these things. And you're just waiting and waiting and waiting. And then there just comes a point where like you can't wait anymore. And in a 12-team league and a 10-team league, you know, you might not have that choice and say like, okay, I can bench Aaron Jones. And you probably don't even have the points where you say, I'm going to bench Brandon Jacobs because he's probably your second guy. And especially if you did the 0 running back strategy, that's your first guy. So in a way, you were expecting this to happen. You were expecting ETN to go off. You were expecting these things to happen. And that's well and good. And injuries do play a role. But the fact that some of these players that, for all intents and purposes, were still in a good situation and aren't performing is really rough. But then I look and I see guys like Kenneth Walker, who a lot of people, you know, in the media, on TikTok, in the magazines, all that stuff, were saying the guy you don't, even though Rashad Penny is the starter, you want Kenneth Walker because Kenneth Walker by midseason is going to be the guy. Same thing goes for Travis Etienne. They said, okay, James Robinson might be the guy right now, and he was for that first week, but Travis Etienne's the guy. Same with Breece Hall. It's going to take him a couple weeks to get going. Same with Dameon Pierce. It's going to take him a couple weeks to get going. And
Javonte Williams was the same deal, even though he got hurt.
Javonte Williams was the same deal where we said, okay, Javonte Williams is the guy, but hey, you know, Melvin Gordon's still there. And so injuries do play a role into it, but what we're seeing is this meteoric rise of talented running backs on teams that are actually using those running backs and using them to their potential. Like even though Seattle lost that game, I mean, Kenneth Walker, and I told you in the DFS, that's the Chargers defense is so bad that Kenneth Walker is going to shred them, and he did. And the Seattle's defense is so bad that Austin Eckler shredded them, and he did. And the fact that you could have those two players on your team on a week-to-week basis would make me overjoyed as a fantasy player. And it's one of those things where moving forward, people always talk about rookie breakouts, and they always talk about, you know, like second-year guys, third-year guys that can really break out. Is when you build your lineup for volatility, you're going to have some bad weeks, and that is unquestioned. It's going to happen. But you have to be the type of person that's willing to accept that volatility. And I know
not panic and trade it away.
A lot of owners aren't willing to do that. And so
they think they are on draft day, but they're not in week 6.
Yeah, like if I have a team right now, because this is a conceivable team that you could have in your league. Joe Burrow could be your quarterback. Austin Eckler could be your running back. Your running back 2 could potentially be David Montgomery or Ezekiel Eliott. Diggs.
Yeah.
Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Yeah, you're talking like the 5th pick in the draft type thing.
Kenneth Walker could be your flex. And then you could be sitting on a bunch of guys that maybe you took Kyle Pitts too, because it was perfectly plausible that in that kind of landscape you could have taken him. Maybe he's your tight end. Maybe you picked up Taysom Hill, right? You're sitting pretty good. And this is the thing about fantasy is that you need to be the type of owner that is willing to move on from a player that's not, and you're not going to have FOMO from it, but not necessarily drop him. That you're just willing to move on from him. And but sometimes it's hard. Like I said a couple weeks ago, it's hard to move on a guy like Aaron Rodgers. It's hard to move on
Sure is. No,
Alexander Jones.
that's all true. Hey, let me throw this question at you here, because it is very obvious this point in the year that the zero running back strategy is winning. I mean, there's just no way around that.
It hits every now and again in a year. Like I said, it really depends on players.
But my question is we're going to see a gajillion articles about how, people said they didn't want a Cooper Kupp, and people got him as late as 8th, and he took off with it. And people who took Chase early in the first round, you paired Chase and Diggs or Chase and Adams, you have a blockbuster killer team, all because of all this second tier of running backs, the ETNs, the Montes, everyone you just said, all of them of the world worked. So my question for you is this, is that when we enter into next season, do you see that the prime running backs, I'm talking the Henrys and the Ecklers and the Saquons, do you see their value becoming even higher? Or do you see it dropping down and having almost a 50-50 running back wide receiver split for most people's first rounds?
I do want to. All right, I want to touch on that, but I do want to say this first as an example from this year to build my point a little bit. Okay, so I drafted this year from, like I said, the 4th position in my league in Yahoo. The guy who drafted 11th is tied with me on the year. We're both 3 and 4. I lost 2 games by like 4 points or less. Ooh. One game I lost by like 0.5 points, which was really rough.
Sounds it.
My team went running back heavy. I took Kirk Cousins really late. Dalton Schultz didn't pan out, whatnot. He did what everybody else did. And he took, well, not what everybody else did, but his team looks a little bit interesting. He had DeAndre Swift first round, Jamar Chase after the turn because the 12th owner took Saquon and Kamara, Breece Hall in the 3rd, Mike Williams in the 4th, Gabe Davis in the 5th. Now, he has the same amount of points scored as me because of that benching of Taysom Hill that I told you a couple weeks ago. But he went for the high volatility players that on any given week could smack you in the face. He went with Trey Lance. Trey Lance got injured. Kenneth Gainwell, James Cook, Sky Moore, Pat Freiermuth, Davis Price, Boston Scott. He even drafted Donta Foreman in the 16th round. We're talking about high potential guys. And he's willing to stick it out because I tried to offer him a trade a couple weeks ago for Chase or Breece Hall, and he wasn't willing to move from it. The guy that's number 1 in our league actually drafted, let me see where he drafted at. He drafted 10th. Okay. He got Nick Chubb at 10.
Oh, he's on fire.
Came back around, and he passed on guys like Swift, Barkley, and Kamara to do that. Then he took Kelsey at 15, passing on guys like Fournette, Aaron Jones, Zeke, Javonte Williams, Diggs. I took Adams because Diggs went right before me, which then I passed on Samuel or Debo, CeeDee, Tyreek, Mark Andrews, James Conner, and Cam Akers, and I took Travis Etienne. He took, at that next pick, he took Michael Pittman at 34. Coming back around, he took Josh Allen in the 4th round.
No, that'll do it. Yeah.
Now, his team
had one of each.
His team has one of each, right? And when you look at it, I just beat him this week because Allen was on the bye. He had Marquise Brown, who obviously got hurt. He had Cordarrelle Patterson, who also got hurt. But we're looking at after Nick Chubb, his next best running back is Devin Singletary.
Yeah.
And Alexander Mattison. So, like I said, you have to have the blood to do this draft. And I've done it before during years where Larry Fitzgerald was playing in the league, where I would go 3 or 4 wide receivers at the beginning of the draft, try to take a guy that I thought would be really well. Then the dynamic shifted in the NFL where wide receivers were the best wide receivers were what I wanted to have. They were really phenomenal, really fantastic. And I really didn't want to touch those top running backs. And then it comes around where I could start dinking and dunking wide receivers at the end of the draft or at the beginning or in the middle of the draft and be like, there's a lot more value at wide receiver in the middle of the draft than there is at running back in the middle of the draft. Mm-hmm. But I think what's going to happen, though, is that there's going to be now a dynamic shift where fantasy players are going to be like, there's going to be some that are set in their ways like me, where I'm just going to look for the best available place that's going to fill out my team. And I'm going to hem and haw on a couple of guys. And regardless of who I get, the next guys that I wanted are going to be going in the next 3 or 4 picks, because you just have to make a decision like that. Mm-hmm. But as to the draft strategy, a lot of articles are going to be writing about it, because the teams at the end of the year that are probably going to be in championship games are going to be those teams that went out on a limb, took Burrow early, took Hurts early, took Allen early, or earlier than they should have been, mm-hmm. And paired them with elite level talent at wide receiver and got a running back that happened to hit. Yeah. The issue with the strategy is that if you pick the running back that doesn't hit,
which normally is the case. I mean, there's 5 backs that were sub-tier that are hitting. Jacobs is hitting. Hall hit. Walker's hitting. Pierce is hitting. Like, that's 4 without even.
And Gibson is hit here and there.
Yeah. So my point is that you normally get 1, not 4. So I am sitting here to defend the old school way of running back, because I believe in it. Despite the fact Najee is screwing me, I believe in it.
I'm going to flip the script on you. And we talked about this a couple weeks ago, but it goes to the point of talent, right? And it goes to the point of who's scoring the points. Now, we talked about this in reference to Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, but there's no points being scored in the league except for 4 teams.
No. It goes to the point where Patrick Mahomes was outscored by Travis Kelce, right? Is that owners across any fantasy league know that if you take a quarterback in the first round, you are submarining yourself at talent at other positions.
Absolutely.
And that's the reason people don't do it. You know, the off years, you might have Kurt Warner with the greatest show on turf. You had Peyton Manning during his best years. You had Tom Brady during his best years, where people were willing to bet a first or second round pick on these guys. But most of us were still in the vein, I got to get my running back 1. I got to get my running back 2. Then I can do whatever I want. Well, with the flip in script is that we're now at the cusp, because there's so much technology and there's so much media that you can consume. We're at the cusp now where everybody is going to, unless you're in 15 leagues, everybody's thinking very similar to you. They're getting the same information. They all know Dameon Pierce could do well. They all know, but do they have the blood to do it? And that goes to what we were saying, is that if you are picking high volatility, you have to understand and know that you're going to lose weeks, and you're going to lose them bad. And a lot of people, like one of our friends in the past, Brian, we used to do a league together that was a 14 team. You were in it one year, 14 team.
I won it.
Crazy.
Let me come back.
Crazy league. I think I ended up winning it one year too, maybe, or I was close to winning it a couple of years.
I had Marcus Colson on my team. That's how long back that was.
Consistency in that league was really important. Volatility was nice, because the weeks that your wide receiver scored, 20, the scoring was really weird in this league, but the week that you would score 20 points at wide receiver, the other receivers wouldn't even be close, because it wasn't a point per catch, and it was 1 point for every 10 receiving yards or something, or not 1 point for every 10 receiving yards, 1 point for every 25 receiving yards. So if you didn't have guys that could move the ball, you were in trouble if you were relying on volatility, because it wasn't going to happen. And it was also an IDP league. So times are changing where almost everybody is in a league where they reward 1 point per yard or 1 point per 10 yards for running backs and wide receivers. And almost everybody is getting around to the fact that it's a PPR league. If it was not a PPR league, what you would be seeing most likely, and you know, our audience can tell me if this is incorrect. If it's not a PPR league, and even if it's not a half-point PPR league, quarterbacks are going a little bit higher. Running backs are going higher, particularly the ones that get the ball running a lot, because Aaron Jones isn't as, if he's not running, he's not as valuable in that league, because in that
Henry's much more valuable in that scenario.
in that league, in that type of league, he only had, I mean, he still scored a lot. He would have had 8 plus 12. He would have had 20 points, maybe, depending on, I don't really know what his receiving yards total was. So, but with everybody playing in similar leagues, all of that information is built in the league. Like, I used to read the Fantasy Index magazine, and they used to do like TD only leagues versus yardage heavy leagues. And I always like to see, because their rankings would come out way, way, way early before all the offseason stuff would happen. And they would mark who was in a committee, and they still do. The magazine still exists. I love to use it as a reference when I'm building teams, because it shows me what was happening a couple months ago, and then I'm seeing the news now of what's happening right now. And when I look at the stats, a lot of players shift, but usually the quarterbacks are pretty steady. And usually the top end running backs are pretty steady. And usually the top end wide receivers, even if it's not a PPR league, are usually steady because they're getting a lot of yards.
Yeah, you force the ball to your top guys
to get the touchdowns. Now, I believe in the first or second round, regardless of what strategy you follow, you take the guy that you think has the highest floor but the best potential for success, if you get what I'm saying. So, like, if you like Diggs over Adams, take Diggs. If you like Travis Etienne over Zeke, take Etienne. Like, the fact that there's so many people out there that are like, rate my team, and that's going to get under the skin of a lot of people. I just don't like it, because there's no point to it, because I only can rate my team in comparison to everybody else's. So when you saw, for all the people out there, when we put out what do you think of our team? I showed you all the teams.
Yeah, you have to. You have to look at comparison of the draft.
You have to know what's going on. So, like, oh, you got Marquise Brown in the 6th round. Great. Who'd you pass up on? Oh, you passed up on Travis Etienne. Well, you look pretty foolish, right? You know, that's the type of thing that we're thinking about here, is that, to your point earlier, people are going to be like, oh, okay. But they're going to see that it ain't going to work, because everybody's going to be doing the same thing. Everybody's going to be looking for the same guys. And all of a sudden you're going to have, like in my Yahoo League, we value running backs a lot, even though we don't say it. That's why Zeke goes in the 2nd round, because we know his talent, and we don't want to pass up and think, if I have to sit here for 12 more picks and know that I didn't get him when I wanted him, when I know. So it takes an acumen that you're like, okay, I know my stuff going into this draft. There are going to be a few guys that I'm looking for in certain rounds. But if talent falls to me, am I going to have the muster to say, I'm going to take that guy over my guy that I really, really liked, because I think he provides a better talent? And you see it, and it happens. And like you said, to the point,
this is the difference between drafting off of a stat board and drafting with feel.
Like you were saying, feelings, you know, your team can end up sucking, and that's just what it is. Hopefully you're not in $1,000 buy-in. But
yeah, like, I'll give you an example where I got burned on one. I honestly thought entering this season that Julio Jones was going to become Gronk. I thought that he was going to get all of that short yardage, just catch the ball. And I know the history of Julio. He's never got a touchdown in his life, blah, blah, blah. I get that. Tom Brady loved Gronk. I thought he was going to be the new Gronk. I really did. And Julio can't get on the field, and Brady can't complete a pass.
Yeah.
So
And it
that's
happens to everybody. And those hits, like you were saying, are few and far between. When
yeah,
I won,
that's all. It's all started with that. Like that second tier, or maybe this is the third tier of running backs, doesn't normally have a hit rate of over 50%, let alone in the
but
80s
here's
like
the
it does
point.
now.
Here's the
And
point.
that's going to screw people next year.
Well, here's the point that I'm making to that end. Like I hit it one year when I won the Yahoo League. I did go wide receiver heavy, and this was a couple years ago actually. I think it was like three or 4 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. I did go wide receiver heavy in that draft. I normally do. I shifted this year. I normally do because the running backs were falling to me because people were taking wide receivers. And I'm like, okay, I'll take David Montgomery in this round. Okay, I'll take Travis Etienne in the third round. Like David Montgomery in the fourth round shouldn't happen. That shouldn't be a thing that happened. So although I was looking at other guys, I had to move myself up on him. And I missed out on Jalen Hurts, or I missed out on these people because I preferred this player over them. What you have to go into it thinking to yourself is, these are my can't miss guys. These are the guys I really, really love. These are the guys that I think are going to pop off. So if I'm at a point where I'm deciding against a second-year guy or a third-year guy versus a rookie or whatever, and they're basically similar, I'm going to take the guy that I like more.
Okay.
And I could be wrong. And I could be wrong, and it ends my team. But what the problem is about the wide receiver heavy strategy or the no running back strategy, whatever you want to call taking wide receivers early, is that after you get past Chase, Diggs, Adams,
basically that's the line.
Jefferson, Kupp.
Well, Jefferson a couple belong in it, but I don't think CD belongs in that group.
Yeah, CD, Debo, whatever you want,
they're not in that group.
I'm saying whoever you want to put in your top 10. Okay,
I would say 5.
You have to ask yourself, if you're sitting there, you have to ask yourself, I'm sitting there in the second round, okay, and I see CD Lamb on the board and I see Davante on the board at the same time. I couldn't believe Davante fell that far to me, and I had to take him. I wasn't planning on taking him. I was planning on taking another running back there.
Happened to me with Kupp at the 8th.
But I had to take him. So coming back around, I was like, oh man, I have to take Etienne, because I know if I don't take Etienne now, he's not going to come back to me. Even though his value might have been 4th round, I had to take him in the 3rd round, beginning of the 3rd round, because I wouldn't get him. And you can't rely on your league mates to trade with you. You can't rely on that. So like, you're going to overvalue certain players. The problem with the zero running back strategy is that if you miss on your top guy, or you miss on the top 2 guys, like we're seeing with Aaron Jones this year, if you have Aaron Jones, most likely you're still okay-ish if you didn't do what we both did in our Yahoo League, in our other Yahoo League, which is paired him with Najee. If you took Aaron Jones and you took Jamar Chase, you're still in good condition.
Yeah.
If you took Najee and Jamar Chase, you're still in good condition. If you took Najee and Saquon Barkley, you're still in good shape. The issue comes in is that it comes down and you go, okay, I did zero running backs. All my wide receivers are beasts. I took Joe Burrow, or I took Kirk Cousins, or whenever you want to take a quarterback. And your running backs end up falling apart. And then you don't have any depth to get you through the season. And we talked about depth as being an important piece in trades, where you're trading your depth for star guys or guys that you think are elite level talents, and then you're not having depth. But for guys that keep a lot of depth, when you start understanding the fact, and this happened to me when I was doing this strategy, when you start understanding the fact and you're like, oh, I have to take both Buffalo running backs because there's not another running back on the board. Or the year I won it, I think I had Ramondre. I don't know. It may have been Ramondre. I don't know. I had Ramondre Stevenson one year because I took him really late. I think the year I won, it was a resurgence of a guy that wasn't supposed to be good, and then he ended up being good. But when you do that, and it's in a committee situation, this is why I go back to Fantasy Index, where they would mark running backs in committees. when you go into a committee situation, particularly with like Javonte or whatever, it doesn't. If they don't hit, they don't hit, and it's going to happen. I would rather that happen after I already have after I have a running back or after I have 2 running backs. I'm more willing to take chances like that. Whereas with wide receiver, if I get 1 top wide receiver and I can potentially get a star at my 2nd or 3rd while filling out my running back spot and filling out my quarterback spot or tight end spot or however you want to do it, I feel better at the end of the day.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. I think what you're going to see though now is that you're going to see people are going to be like, screw it, I'm taking Josh Allen and then deal with the remnants, because taking Josh Allen as part of a 0 running back strategy, you're taking Jalen Hurts, you're taking any of the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks in a given year that are supposed to be the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks in a given year.
That is a huge advantage.
It usually doesn't miss.
No, well, those 3 don't miss. But if you're like, oh, I'm going to take like the 5th quarterback, that's where I say you're in trouble. But
you only would take that 5th quarterback after you have essentially built a little bit of a lineup. But I'm not going to go 4 wide receivers, or I'm not going to go.
Like I took Mahomes in the 3rd round.
I'm not going to go wide receiver, Josh Allen, wide receiver, running back, just because somebody told me to.
Mm-hmm. Well, that to me is the trap that a lot of people get into. They get told this is the position I should draft, and it costs you. So,
you can cost yourself too by saying, and this is the other problem that I was alluding to earlier, is that if you take so much of a position early on, you say to yourself, okay, I'm going to take all wide receivers and quarterbacks and tight ends until the 6th round. Then I'm going to go in and I'm going to snap up two of these running backs coming back now. Well, you just locked yourself into potential garbage, because that's essentially what I was dealing with for a couple of weeks. But my wide receivers were so talented that they were producing, that it didn't really worry me that much. My quarterback was producing. The crux is, if one of those elite talent level wide receivers gets hurt or something happens, injuries are part of the fantasy football game and part of football in general. But it's all about roster construction, and it's about thinking about the guys that you think you're going to smack, taking 1 or 2 of them after you have taken guys that at least for a couple of weeks here and there until your running backs or wide receivers that are going to smack, that are going to get you those wins. Because in a short amount of time, you have to win, and you can't be waiting forever on people, and you can't,
Well, Bob, I did wait on some people, and I want to try to break them down here real quick, because there's essentially 3 players that I had that I waited on, and use this opportunity to bring them up here. I waited on Godwin to get healthy. That seems like that is going to be a win. I like that. I waited on Hopkins to get unsuspended.
You
really
can
liking
wait if you feel confident in your lineup.
But like I said, I wasn't confident in my lineup. I knew I was going to have a rough first 6 weeks, and then I also took Gallup.
But if you took Diggs and Adams as your 2 wide receivers, your bench
had those
guys on it.
Yeah, I get it. Like I said, I took Najee and Jones. I'm not hiding that. But now coming around, because I got Hopkins so late, I basically have been playing the whole league 3 rounds lower than everyone against me, because where I took these 3 guys.
And that's the point that I was trying to make, is that
but my point is that it was hard. And the way that we do our wild cards is based upon total points, not record. So I think that's what made me a little more confident with it, because I basically had 6 weeks where I'm going to be losing, and then I have 8 weeks to try to make up the gap to try to get to the 3rd highest points. I think I'm going to do it, and I'm really excited for it.
Not many people want to do that, and
it's not. But I look at my roster now, and it is stacked.
Right.
Assuming, and this is what I do want to talk about, is Gallup going to become part of the Dallas offense?
Maybe.
Because he got 2 targets last week.
But you've waited 6 weeks. 7 weeks. Why not wait another week or two?
Oh, no, I have to. But my entire strategy was built around this huge, great crescendo, and he's just falling flat. It's sad.
And that goes to what I was saying is that, if you're
sad for a
waiting,
ninth pick, but it's still
if
sad.
you're waiting on a guy like DeAndre Hopkins later in the draft, and you want to go after him, and you wouldn't have, if that was your game plan heading into the draft, and you said, I'm going to pick off a couple of these guys that are injured right now. You have just said in your mind, and I'm guaranteeing that there's probably maybe 15% of fantasy players out there that did this, where they took Kupp or they took Jefferson, they slid back around, they took Adams if he was there, or they took CeeDee Lamb, which was more likely. You come back around, you get Travis Etienne, or you get whoever was in the third round. People were saying Saquon Barkley in the third round, depending on when you drafted. If you did that, you probably were not targeting DeAndre Hopkins. You were probably not targeting guys like Hollywood Brown because you didn't trust them. So it really what the strategies come down to is that you believe, and as much as we want to say it's about analytics, it is about analytics, but you've got to, at the end of the day, you want to put out a team that you're going to be like, all right, yeah, I think it has a chance to win. I think it's pretty good. But I'm not waiting. If I'm drafting Adams in the first round and I'm drafting Diggs, and those are the two guys I'm taking, I'm not taking Hopkins. I'm going running backs, I'm going quarterbacks, I'm going another wide receiver, probably a little bit earlier to be like, okay, these are my guys. This is what I'm going to do. So your strategy changes. There's always guys like that. So the no running back guys, they always look for those running backs. You are a running back heavy guy who always looks for those wide receivers. And in both player pools, usually speaking, there are going to be more wide receivers on a week-to-week basis that are volatile that could smack than running backs.
Yeah,
and that's the history of fantasy football in a nutshell, is that's why running backs get taken in the first round, is that they are on the field more. They are on the field and they can be targeted in two different ways. And at the end of the game, if your team is leading, you're probably gonna guy's
a lot of garbage
get
points.
the ball more.
It's the same argument for taking a linebacker on a team that's gonna be losing a lot. You're gonna get a lot of garbage plays.
So if it so happens that I happen to be like, okay, I took 3 running backs in my, like this year in my Yahoo League, it was just an aberration because I wasn't really intending to take Chase Edmonds, but then he fell to me, and I'm like, okay, he's the starter, might as well do it. Then and same with David Montgomery. I was like, I wasn't expecting to take him. I was hoping to take a wide receiver here or somebody else, but the guys I wanted weren't there, and I thought, okay, maybe I can wait. They ended up getting, whatever. But that's kind of the thing that I'm thinking about here. Is like guys like Kenneth Walker, guys like Dameon Pierce, they're hitting this year. They're doing really well. But on a year-to-year basis, like you were saying, usually you're only going to find a couple of those diamonds in the rough. And sometimes the same drafter takes a lot of them because they're like, my team, I'm building my team for week 6. I'm building my team for week 7. I'm going to take guys that I think are high floors instead of high ceilings to get me through the first couple of weeks. Then once these guys start to get cooking, that's who I'm going to take. Like I've been in, like you've been, I've been in a league with the same guys for probably the last 7 years. It's there's been some people have moved and there's been some there. I was once in a league with 10 other guys. Then, did some random drafts here and there and do drafts with you and stuff. But when you know your league mates and when you know your league, what they like, you can tend to like scope it out and be like, okay, I know Mike is going to go after Kenneth Walker pretty late. So I'm going to take him earlier than expected. Hope he pays dividends. And that's the struggle that you have to deal with as a fantasy member or as a fantasy manager. You are thinking about players like Aaron Jones, or not Aaron Jones, Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers was drafted super late this year because we're like, screw it. If he hits in the 14th round or in the 13th round and he's my first quarterback, okay, cool, because I probably have better talent at the other skilled possession players. So it's all of your metal. It's all of, I know we didn't talk about a lot of any specific players during this hour, but
well, it's an important thought to have as we enter into the fact that this is week 7. This is when some people are just saying, I'm out. And what could I have done differently? And what will the future hold? I think that it's important because we are at the mid-season point of leagues, and there are people out there that are 1-6, and it's time to start thinking about what is next year. There's also people out there who are 6-1 who think that what they had is always going to work. And I think that there's a good chance that if we're banking on essentially 4 rookies showing up at the running back position next year, that it's gonna hurt.
But it's not gonna happen.
That's what I'm saying. It's not gonna happen.
The dichotomy is gonna change. So if everybody's doing X, then everybody will see, oh, why? And that's why it shifts on a year-to-year basis. That's why there's all these strategies that happen, because people have found success with them in various leagues at various points because of their league mates. But I can tell you this: if I have 5 people going wide receiver first, or if I'm in the first 4 picks and I see wide receiver, Derrick Henry's my guy. Austin Eckler's my guy at 4. If I'm drafting 8th and I see running back, wide receiver's my guy at 8. I don't want the 8th best player in the first round. I want the best player.
No, I got you.
And if the best player happens to be the 8th best, or if the best player left happens to be the 8th player at his position, I'll take him.
It's just,
I don't want him.
No, I got you. Well, this has been the Fantasy Value Hour. Bob, is there any specific players you want to talk about here as we're concluding here today? Or
I want to talk about how the Lions look like garbage without Amon-Ra St. Brown and DeAndre Swift. That offense is hot garbage. In addition to that, New England's defense did not look good. I know they had
told you they weren't good. They were the Mirage.
They did not.
Dude, how did they lose that game? Like, let's for real talk about that. The Bears have the least amount of talent on offense of any team in the league.
The Bears started making Justin Fields run. He had like 80 yards.
I know.
That was a big difference, and they weren't really ready for that, it seemed.
How could you not be ready for that?
Also, Bailey Zappi threw, Bradley Bailey threw two interceptions. Mac Jones also played like the first half or a quarter and then left. So it was a weird game. As I've been saying about New England all year, they're a weird team.
They're not good though.
They're
going to end up being the Steelers' worst loss. I'm willing to bet that. I
still think that they potentially could backdoor their way in the playoffs because the AFC is so weak.
Well, yeah, you got to rank them right now. Who's your 7 in on the AFC?
All right. So if you would ask me,
I'm asking you right now.
Who's my 7 in the AFC?
Yeah.
All right. So let's go around. Kansas City.
Division winner.
Buffalo.
Division winner.
AFC South. Whew. Let me come back to that one.
All right. We're going to assume only one out of the South. Okay.
AFC North. Cincinnati.
All right. 3 wild cards.
3 wild cards. I still believe in the Chargers. But their division is very competitive. So even with the Broncos there, Broncos defense is pretty good. So I'm a little curious there. Probably Baltimore. And probably either the Jets or New England. I mean,
the Jets are 5-2. It's hard to say
it's
that's
hard.
Not gonna hold it.
With Brees going down, they just got James Robinson. We aren't sure how that's going to work out. But the Jets, as we were talking with our guest yesterday, they look so good at certain points of time, and they look so bad at certain points of time. And We're not sure what the coach is going to do, but I'm more likely going to bank on good coaching as the season goes forward, because good coaches can usually find the best in players, as we were saying last week. And if I'm going Jets or Patriots, I'm going to lean Patriots on the coaching side, because I think that the coaching side is there. And this week, the Bears, I mean, that game was gross. It was disgusting. There was rain everywhere. The game script was.
Does every game in Chicago have to be rainy?
That was in New England.
Oh, that's right. Sorry about that.
But every game Chicago plays in, it has to be rainy. I think it's in the bylaws of the NFL right now. There has to be some sort of precipitation of some sort. But if I'm looking across the league, but I will say this: the Patriots, the Jets, and the Chargers and the Raiders are most likely all better, or will be better, than the 7th or 8th seed or the 7th seed or the 6th seed in the NFC.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt about that. The AFC has blah, but it's a cut higher than the NFC blah.
And the majority of the best teams in the NFC are in the NFC East.
Yeah, and I know that they're 5-2 as the Giants, but I don't think they're that good.
Now,
they've won games they should have won.
If you were to pick out the NFC, you have struggling Rams. You have Niners who are finding.
Yeah, but you still gotta give I still would probably, so if I did the NFC,
a wild card.
All right,
in what they're doing too.
So the Eagles are the 1 seed without a doubt in the NFC. I have no doubt in my mind about that. I think I've finally come around to you that say that Minnesota's win the NFC North. The NFC South, because I have to pick one, I'm going to go with New Orleans. Just for the simple fact that I do not trust Tom Brady. I do trust the running game of Atlanta. I just don't trust Mariota. So, given the fact that New Orleans has already beaten Atlanta, I really think those two are going to be tied.
That division is probably only going to have one person.
Oh, they only have a one, but I'm going to go with New Orleans in it. And out west, I mean, this is how gross the NFL is.
They're all mid.
Seattle might get it. I think Seattle's going to be. I know Seattle's not finishing in last in that division. Like, I know that.
But they can easily finish first.
I think they might without Russell Wilson, and I think that there's a lot to that. In terms of the other wild card teams, I have to give to the Giants by default because they have the 5 wins. The fact that Cowboys survived Rush, and then we look at who's the third one going to be, and I think it's going to be the final game between San Francisco and the Rams. And that does say that the Packers didn't make the playoffs in that scenario. So when you just say is the 6th best team, in my opinion, will be the Giants. Will the 6 and 7 seed of the AFC be better than them? Well, then we're looking at the realm of Baltimore, New England, and Miami. Are they better than the Giants? Absolutely. So I think that's pretty much going to be a given when it's all said and done.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I'm looking forward to seeing, and it definitely will affect fantasy lineups going forward if teams feel like they're out of it and a player has been
get off the Jacksonville bus.
They're going to be there. I still believe in a lot of players that aren't playing well. I'm hoping they'll turn it around, but
not higher than Najee.
That's just me. Hey, if Najee goes up and has 30 points one week, that'd be real nice.
It's the only way they beat Philly. They're not going to beat Philly.
He'll probably do it against me when I play you. So.
They're not going to beat Philly. But if they beat Philly, it's going to be because of Najee.
Yeah.
But again, they're not going to beat Philly.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to consider that the show here then, Bob.
Quite the ride.
Quite the ride indeed. Well, thank you guys all for being with us. Click like and subscribe, and we'll be with you here next time.